Okay, welcome back to the Contrarians. We've got another dark horse panel here going. It's just the three of us. We might have one other person joining us, but as it stands, we're going to get started here. This is one of our famed panels where we go through and analyze an album in detail. And now we're looking at a dark horse Deep Purple album, Slaves and Masters. Just a little bit of background. I won't go into my spiel at this point, but came out October 23rd, 1990. Kind of a weird time for a Deep Purple album. I always thought that was a strange year. So this is between House of Blue Light and the Battle Rage and the Battle Rages on, and and the battle rages on. And basically it's the only one with Joe Lynn Turner in the band. It went to number 87 on Billboard. John Lord never felt it was quite a Deep Purple album, but the other guys kind of did. We've got three guys from Rainbow in here. I won't put my opinion on that yet, but we have Roger Glover, we have Ritchie Blackmore, we have Joe Lynn Turner, and then we have the standbys, the stalwarts, Ian Pace and John Lord in this band as well. So yeah, four songs get a group credit. Most of the rest, we've got Al Greenwood in there from Foreigner on one credit, but the rest of them are Glover and Blackmore and Turner. So without further ado, I guess let's start with Tate. Tate, tell us what you think of Slaves and Masters, and we'll get you to give it a rating at the end as well.
Sure. So in the history of shows I've done on this channel, some of the albums that we've featured in shows that I've been on have been albums that are universally seen by that band's fan base as bad, but I try to look for the positives in each of in albums like that, and I try to really appreciate the good stuff on said objectively bad albums. However, this Deep Purple album was not one of them. So to me, I call this album Blackmore's Appeasement because, you know, the Mark II lineup reunites in '84. They put out Perfect Strangers, which is a big seller for them. They go on this huge tour and end up attracting a new fan base as a result of it. You know, for the most part, from what I've read, Blackmore and Gillan were able to keep it together. But then House of Blue Light comes out. It's not as big of a seller as Perfect Strangers was, and in the eyes of many people, not as good of an album. And then you see the old Blackmore-Gillan rivalry start to rear its ugly head. And then by the turn of the 90s, they're faced with a decision on who they want to keep, Blackmore or Gillan. And I'm sure management had something to do with it. And then you knew Gillan was out. And after auditioning a whole series of vocalists, they end up getting, I'm sure they wanted to appease Blackmore by getting his vocalist from the latter period of Rainbow in Joe Lynn Turner, who by this point had done stuff with Yngwie Malmsteen. Right? Am I correct? Did he do that album with Yngwie Malmsteen after Rainbow? Okay.
Yeah.
And
Odyssey, isn't it? It's called Odyssey.
Yeah, Odyssey. That's right. You know, was available, so they let him in the band, and the result was this album. So kind of going through here track by track, King of Dreams is, you know, it's okay. Kind of reminds me of Urgent by Foreigner, which not as good. It's got a pretty catchy chorus, and you know, with good Blackmore guitar flourishes, and it's got a pretty cool solo section. And one thing that really knocks this album for me is what the hell is with all of these weird, mysterious intros for damn near every song on the album that lasts like 30 to 45 seconds. Why? That's what I want to know. I'm sure Blackmore had something to do with it, because, you know, throughout Rainbow's history from the 70s and the 80s, and during live shows especially, he'd begin, you know, like Man on the Silver Mountain with him doing like solo guitar noodling, and then they play an excerpt of Lazy or something like that. So I'm sure Blackmore had a hand in coming up with these really weird intros. So that's kind of a common theme throughout this album. But yeah, King of Dreams, yeah, it's okay. Solo section. And that's another common theme throughout this album too. Most of the songs on here are painfully mediocre, but man, they have a really good Blackmore solo. And then, John Lord as well. So Blackmore and Lord really, really rescue what, painfully mediocre songs there are on here. So anyway, King of Dreams, it's just urgent by Foreigner, but not as good. The cut runs deep. Again, pretty good up-tempo Rainbow song that probably wouldn't have sounded out of place on Straight Between the Eyes or Difficult to Cure. Good vocals from Joe Lynn Turner and good Blackmore and Lord solos. And that's one of the better songs on the album. Fire in the Basement is actually a pretty good song. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Lazy. Again, good Blackmore and Lord solos and a really clever key change at the end. So Fire in the Basement is definitely one of the better songs on there. Truth Hurts, kind of a forgettable ballad that would have sounded pretty good on Bent Out of Shape. Great Blackmore solo. Again, Blackmore coming in and, at the end of the day and saving the song with a really good solo. And just kind of a forgettable song. Breakfast in Bed, again, is a forgettable song with a slight funk edge, with a decent Blackmore solo that's not very good. Love Conquers All, again, a bland ballad with pretty good Joe Lynn Turner vocals and, Blackmore solo that's pretty good, but maybe not quite as good enough as to save it. Fortune Teller is actually another highlight of this album. It, again, in my opinion, could have fit really well on Straight Between the Eyes, or maybe even on Bent Out of Shape as well. And Blackmore, once again, puts in a great solo, and it's got a really powerful chorus. And kind of maybe it reminds me a little bit of Tearing Out My Heart from Straight Between the Eyes. Maybe, again, not as good, but Fortune Teller, another highlight on the album. Too Much Is Not Enough is another pretty good song. I think it would have sounded pretty good on House of Blue Light, and ended with another good Blackmore solo. Wicked Ways is a really good way to finish the album. Great vocals from Joe Lynn Turner on that. Great Blackmore solo, and a great a great way to keep the song interesting. They decided to throw in like a really slow, moody solo section in the middle, and it worked. I don't know why they didn't do that for any other song on this album, but Wicked Ways is a really good way to finish off the album. So Wicked Ways is probably my favorite song easily from the album, but then Fortune Teller is pretty good, and Fire in the Basement's pretty good. The rest of it, okay, Cut Runs Deep isn't too bad, and King of Dreams isn't too bad. So overall, because it's not unlistenable, just a large portion of the album is just painfully forgettable and painfully mediocre, and it's how it sounds like the Joe Lynn Turner era of Rainbow, but not nearly as good. It's a 3.5 out of 10 for me.
Okay. All right.
So
well,
maybe that's being a little bit kind to it, but
3.5 out of 10.
Yeah, 3.5 out of 10.
That's kind. Wow, that's pretty harsh.
So just because the songs that I like on here are nowhere close to being upper echelon Deep Purple songs, but for compared to the rest of the stuff on this album, they're really good. So, it's not, I don't really want to rate it higher than that because, if I rate it as like a 4 or 5, that's kind of implying one of those songs is like a song that I really, really enjoy.
Right.
It's just going off my personal criteria, but for me, it's not, I don't think it's any more than a 3.5 out of 10. I could be convinced to moving it up to a 4, maybe if I give it a few more lessons.
All right. Well, before we move on to Pontus, I may as well show my props here, and we'll. So this is the album we're talking about. That's the album cover, Slaves and Masters. Yeah. Actually, Joe Lynn Turner signed that, but and this when we get to me, I'm gonna say it's kind of the follow up to this, but let's leave the editorializing for later. There's the LP of it, and one of the things. What's that?
What's the album cover like? Because I can't see that. It's Globe, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a globe, and it's got the that crappy new Deep Purple logo that somebody thought was all clever that they've been using. Smack in the middle of Perfect Strangers. Great album, terrible logo. But yeah, it's a globe. Well, no, it's actually more of a crystal ball, actually, and it's
Yeah.
got. Let's see, it's got the Deep Purple logo in it. It's got a few planets. It's got a keyboard. It's got a truck, which morphs into a head with ears. Looks like maybe an hourglass, some lights, some concert lights. Yeah, so that's what it is. Slaves and masters.
Ooh.
Using AND, not an ampersand. And there's a couple of switched around tracks on this, right?
Yeah.
Which ones? There's two, Fortune Teller and I think Fire in the Basement are kind of switched around, but for vinyl versus the CD, and that's what the guys look like. There's kind of a neat photo with the hands all in different positions, right? The arms. So you got Roger, John, Joe, Richie, and then Ian. And then I just wanted to show this. This was my framed up. So that's House of Blue Light, the album before it, right? And there's a couple of passes around that era. And then we've got this is the follow-up album, The Battle Rages On. Did I get that right? No, I got that wrong before. Sorry, it's not And the Battle Rages On. It's The Battle Rages On ellipses. That's what it is. So there we go. And they're using that crappy Deep Purple logo again for that. So anyways, that's your
That's
visual
not a very
break.
good album cover.
What's that?
That's not a very good album cover, The Battle Rages On.
Yeah, none of them really are. House of Blue Light is Slaves and Masters. No, none of them are. Deep Purple has a lot of lousy album covers.
Yeah,
pretty good
looks
ones, but...
it looks like a beer can. Almost. You could always imagine that figure being on a beer can.
Which the DP thing or the
No, the snake or the snake.
Oh, right, yeah.
For the
dragon.
That could be because you got this weird combinations of colors. Also, you got the red and the sort of gray,
green and
it really it looks very cheap.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
The other cover looks great. The Slaves and Master cover looks fine for me.
Okay, well, let's move over to you, and you can tell us what you think of Slaves and Masters.
I amen what Tate says. I mean, it's, to me, this is a very strange album, and as you say, it arrives at a very strange time, because it feels like Recchia wants to do a Rainbow. Recchia wants to do a Foreigner album. Recchia wants to get back to the American radio stations and wants to do it in the AOR way. Yeah. And he gets his way, and the others are on it, and they try very hard to do that. They, as you say, it sounds like the follow-up to Bend Out of Shape, which is smack in the middle of the the AR 80s. It's 83. It's where Journey is high on the heels. It's Foreigner time and all that. But Rainbow wanted to be Journey, but they never could get that high in the States. So he reforms Deep Purple, and now he has a brand. he has a band. He has a success. He has a brand. But what I think happened, I want to go into songs because I want to discuss something else before I go into songs. I think one thing happens that is very important to this album. House of Blue Light is released in January of '87. 2 months later, this arrives. Okay. Whitesnake's 1987 album. It's a major smash in America. It's a major smash for an ex-colleague of Blackmore, and not just a colleague, a competent, a sort of antagonist of Blackmore. They used to fight a lot when they were big in England, both Rainbow and Whitesnake, because they compared each other on the lists in 80 and 82 and all that. So Now, Blackmore has tried to get America since 79, and here's David Coverdale coming in from nowhere, getting all what Blackmore wants on an album. And I think that irked him. I think that nagged at him. And therefore, the House of Blue Light would have worked. It's an English album. It's not an American album. It's a very English album, especially with Gillan's lyrics. It's very sort of British sounding textures. And then, you know, he wants to go that way, and Gillan wants to go in this way. They do the Accidentally on Purpose record, where him and Glover do this experimental singer-songwriter album, and that's enough for him. They do the Nobody's Perfect album, which is just doesn't make it really. And so the decision is made to sack Gillan and to get Turner back in and do an AR album, do a follow-up to Bend Out of Shape, but with the right brand, with Deep Purple brand. But what happens to Blackmore is another change, and this is a universal change. Appetite for Destruction appears and hits real big in 89, 88. And therefore, everything that's AOR goes out of the window. That's the first smash for hard rock of the 80s. The second smash, of course, is Nirvana. But what Appetite for Destruction does is that it brings, you know, it brings back the grittiness in metal. It brings back the grittiness in hard rock. So when we come to 1990, one of the biggest selling albums is Black Rose. AC/DC has a new album out. The Razor's Edge is a huge comeback. Poison, the grittier hair metal bands are there, and it's more bluesy stuff that goes along. Even CC Top has a great album out. And then right in the middle of this, they released this AOR album, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You know, they missed the train totally. If they had chosen to do a grittier album, a harder hitting album, or if this album had been released in 88 rather than 1990, it would have worked better. I agree with Tate. There's a lot of great songs here, but the production is shitty. The production is like, everything is well spread. It's very sort of, you don't get any hard accompanying guitars. You get great guitar solos, but you don't get any bite in the verses. You know, you get, and you don't get much John Lord either. You don't get any grittiness. It's just a nice, very nice album. It's an album that Europe should have made. You know, it's one of those, and it doesn't work that way because it just the songs are not really. The songs might have been there if someone else had arranged it. With other arrangement, it would have worked better. Like you said, the first tracks, like The Cut Runs Deep, would have worked better. But, you know, with a heavier production, that would have worked much better, I think. And some of those songs are very forgettable. I tried to listen today and I can't, for the help of me, sing, let's say, Fortune Teller. I can't remember it. And I've listened to it for the last 30 years. I can't remember it. So it's one of those records where it just disappears into the ether, and therefore it's just not that particularly good. But I do think that is the case why that album sounds the way it does, because they wanted to hit a market, a radio market that was perhaps gone. They came too late.
Yeah.
So my rating is 3 as well. I think 3 out of 10. I don't get it.
All right. All right. Well, I'll be the contrarian here, because I
Good.
quite like this album. So yeah, let me address the production first of all. I find the production to be very pleasant. It has less bite and it is less British than House of Blue Light, and even more so, Perfect Strangers is even grittier than House of Blue Light. House of Blue Light starts really blending in the keyboards nicely. This, you're right. One of the big things about this is you kind of remember the polite, correctly recorded drums, and you remember the bass tone, and you remember Jolyn Turner singing, but you don't remember much of the guitar, and you don't remember much of the keyboards. One thing I do like about the guitar is it is very much this restrained, interesting, egoless Ritchie Blackmore that you get on kind of my favorite of those three with Jolyn Turner, which is the last one, Bent Out of Shape. I think that's the one that has the most artistic value to it. And the other thing that's always amusing to me about this record is it's 3/5 of the band is from Rainbow, but 85% of the band is from Rainbow, because you've got the three top writers, you got the producer, you got the front man, you got the lead singer, you got the guitar player. You've got the three outsized guys in Rainbow is taking up 3/5 of this band. So it's well over 60% of this band is Rainbow, right? Roger Glover, he's on 4 Rainbow albums before this, and he's produced them as well, right? Which is wild. So you get, this definitely sounds like a Roger Glover production, but it sounds like a cross between Straight Between the Eyes and Bent Out of Shape, I think, when it comes to the production. To go through the songs, King of Dreams I quite like. To me, it's like an upgrade on Stone Cold and Street of Dreams, en route to the song Perfect Strangers. So it's a cross between those. So I quite like it. I love this whole kind of soul, the spooky, more melancholy Foreigner style, I suppose. To me, it's truly a Deep Purple song. The cut runs deep. Again, same sort of thing. It's got that British sort of whirling, swirling, well-produced, melodic, yet up-tempo style. So those are 2 of my favorites on the whole album. So it goes downhill from here. But yeah, it reminds me of Drinking with the Devil, things like that. Fire in the Basement, unlike Tate, I'm not very much of a fan of this, because I'm not a fan of a bluesy shuffle. I'm not a fan of Lazy. So I don't want to hear this sort of happy, jammy, go back to our roots sort of style from them. Fortune Teller, unlike Pontus, when I hear that title, I can remember Fortune Teller, that goes through my head when I think of this one.
Good for you.
But it is, I do like the fact that, and I'll put Truth Hurts, so side 2 of the original vinyl. I'll put those 2 together as, it's nice that when they do ballads, it doesn't sound like Aerosmith Angel, and it doesn't sound like Cheap Trick the Flame. It sounds like it's got that moody, good version of Foreigner integrity to it when they do the ballads. I think they're a step above, and I'm pretty happy with them. Love Conquers All is the most popular song on Spotify off of this album. The most plays. King of Dreams is second, and again, it's a dark rainbow kind of ballad. To me, it's got some integrity. It's got some Englishness to it. Breakfast in Bed. Not crazy about this. Very, very Foreigner. It's got the arpeggiated riff though, which I kind of like from it. Jolyn Turner across this album is flagrantly doing his Paul Rodgers thing. It almost is to the point of distraction. He also has a fair bit of vocal fry in his voice that I notice as well that he's using. So he really lays on the Lou Gramm and the Paul Rodgers really thick, to the point where he's almost hogging too much of the spotlight. And it's a great vocal performance. Too Much Is Not Enough is almost like pomp rock. It really stands out on this. It reminds me a little bit of freedom fighter, I guess the verse of freedom fighter a little bit. But it's yeah, it is kind of a different one. We do have that Al Greenwood credit on here, and I agree with Tate. I think that the masterpiece, if well, Tate wouldn't say there's any masterpieces, and neither would I suppose, but the best song in the album is Wicked Ways. It is the most up tempo and rainbow like and metallic. It's plush, it's melodic, it's regal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess to sort of summarize or generalize, the other nice thing about this album it's one of those that you almost forget exists. So you're happy when you go back to the catalog and say, wow, they had this 1990 album with Joe Lynn Turner. I'm going to play it again. And it's kind of accessible and playable, and you don't remember it very well, and you're not completely burned out on it. And it's just a weird, different thing. So I do kind of like it for that reason. I'll definitely say I like House of Blue Light a lot more, and Perfect Strangers. I've got a Contrarians episode where I call it my favorite Deep Purple album. And the funny thing about The Battle Rages On ... is that I can't get away from the whole storyline where Joe was almost in line to be the singer of that album, and then he gets fired and Ian comes back. All the music is finished, and then Ian Gillan has to like write some new lyrics and pop them on top, and you just feel the bad vibes about it, right? And you also feel that they're trying too hard to be heavy, Deep Purple again, right? It's definitely heavier than House of Blue Light, and it's kind of on par with Perfect Stranger. So I hear the bad will in that, and I do like the freshness and the differentness of this, and I do like the casual quality. It's a very friendly album, right? So I am actually on the Wikipedia page as giving it a 7, and I'm quoted or whatever there, and it says from the book. I give it a 7 there, and I was almost thinking of leaning higher, but you guys have convinced me to leave it at 7, so I'm not going to lower it from 7. But yeah, boy, your grades are both very harsh. I didn't think they'd come in that harsh. I was expecting fives from you guys, roughly 5-ish. But I'll leave it at a 7. So there you go. So we've got basically this thing averaging out at about a 4.5, right? 4.55. With all of us.
There is also another song.
Yes.
There was a bonus track.
Yes.
Which is actually much better.
Yes.
It's much grittier.
Good heavy song, good riff, Slow Down Sister, it's called, right?
Slow Down Sister, yeah. It should have been on the album.
And there's also Fire, Ice, and Dynamite, which was for a movie. I think that might have been a little bit slightly later, like recorded a little out of time because John Lord isn't on it. But it's also a fairly heavy, upbeat song. So both of those have a little more fire in the basement than anything that's actually on the album, which is kind of interesting, right? So,
what do you think of my analysis of the time being?
I love that. That's all really super interesting. Yeah, you're right. It absolutely sounds like an album out of time. I equate this kind of an AOR like you did to everything you said, but also I equate it to that interesting, slightly pre-hair metal Sammy Hagar, Night Ranger, Loverboy sort of time and sound, right? And so Rainbow already on those 3 albums was out of date, right? Rainbow already was a 1980, 81, 82 sounding band. So when 83 and 84 rolled around and we had, these barnstorming big albums from Great White and Rat and Quiet Riot and Twisted Sister, they were not sounding like that. They were not that heavy and that direct or whatever you want to call it, that guitar-y. So yeah, it's interesting. All of that stuff, come to think of it, when you think of the production alloy and the alloy between keys and guitars and the way the vocals work and everything, I really think about Loverboy. They really remind me of Loverboy, right? So,
and one more thing I want to add real quick. Another band that had gotten a new singer a few years before that had a lot of success with an album of this ilk, and in my opinion, much more success in the creative front of things, was Bad Company with Holy Water. And to me, even though Brian Howe is Rest His Soul was a completely different singer than Paul Rodgers was. I mean, that is a great album. The songs on there are memorable. There were, like 3 or 4 hits from it. And, because to me, that worked, because it was something fresh. It was something new. Like, this wasn't fresh and new. This was just more of a continuation of the Joe Turner era of Rainbow, like you were saying, Pontus, under the Deep Purple brand. And, so yeah, I didn't think of that.
That's right. And that was excellent, Pontus. Like everything you brought up of the Guns N' Roses and all that as well.
But
really good point.
Do you think we should be more appreciated with it if it had another name, if it had been a Blackmore Soul album?
Yeah.
Or it had been a Rainbow album?
Yeah, if it had been a Rainbow album, I would probably be a little bit more kinder to it.
The other reason we should appreciate it a little more is that they didn't succumb to trying to follow the hair metal trend exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they didn't just go hook, line, and sinker into the mean median average of all the biggest hair metal albums either, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. I mean, AC/DC never did that. And, I would argue Aerosmith didn't even particularly do that, at least with their heavier songs. Pump to me doesn't sound like it gives in completely, right? But certainly AC/DC didn't. Ozzy didn't really particularly give in. And I don't think Deep Purple gave in.
Black Rose didn't give in.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thanks again, guys. This was a great discussion. I loved your input. That was really cool. So yeah, let us know what you guys think in the comments below with this. I mean, are you on online with these brutal grades of 3 and 3.5 or my kinder 7, my friendly 7? But you can join the Patreon, with the Patreon that gets you onto these panels. If you want to join these panels, Marco does a great job over at the Patreon page of laying out schedule and asking, hey, which ones do you want to be on, and filling the slots and all that stuff. And we've got a Ko-Fi and all that as well. So thanks again to Tate and Pontus. Thank you guys. This was very cool. And we shall see you again next time.
Bye.
Good one, guys.